Good Sunday morning. Thanks for joining us. I'm News Center Maine's Don Kerrigan with this week's Political Brew. We are joined by analysts Republican Phil Harriman, Democrat Betsy Sweet. Thanks for being with us. What a surprise, a lot going on this week. So in Maine, we had, I think, an unexpected spectacle in the House of Representatives with a fairly fierce debate over a resolution to support Ukraine and support the United States action helping Ukraine in its war against Russia. And Betsy, you watched this. A number of Republicans were opposed to this. The vote, most Republicans in the House, a majority of them anyway, voted against it. What was this like and why?
Well, it was like the world's upside down, right? All of a sudden we have all these Republicans supporting Putin. And the interesting thing was the debate seemed very much national talking points. It did not, you can tell when people really feel it inside. It did not feel like that. But the other thing was this same, very similar resolution happened last year and only 4 people voted against it. So I don't know what happened between last year and this year that caused so many Republicans and 1 Democrat to move and, to not support the resolution. So it was very bizarre.
Yeah. And then in the Senate, the Senate passed it 27-4, so almost all the Republicans rather supported it in the Senate.
Yes, but the Republican who didn't talked for a really long time.
Well, Phil, what's your take on this?
Well, as someone who had the honor of sitting in the Maine Senate, I saw a number of these joint resolutions, and I would just kind of put it into context in the sense that the legislature passes this joint statement, and it goes to the White House, and someone barrels open the Oval Office door and says, Mr. President, we've got a joint resolution from Maine. It has no effect, none.
But nationally, there's a portion of the national Republican establishment that is now pretty strongly speaking out against the continued aid to Ukraine. What's going on here?
I don't understand it, actually, Don. It seems to me that there perhaps is a request or a demand. What's the end game? What is the finish line of what we're here to do? And let's get it done. I think this protracted, ongoing surprise visits by Janet Yellen to give out another $1 billion has people scratching their heads saying, where does this end?
And yet the people you normally expect to be against it, the peacenik liberals, don't seem to be.
Well, I think that there's huge concern. If you look at what's actually happening on the streets and this missile thing that just happened this past week, this barrage of missiles, are we willing to sit and watch Ukraine just get decimated? The world is on its head.
Yeah, that's probably the best summation of it right there.
That's great political analysis
exactly.
right there.
Wasn't that awesome?
So continuing in Maine, Pine Tree Power, the group hoping to pass a referendum to force a sale of Central Maine Power and Versant Power to a new consumer-owned utility. They're now trying to get a separate bill passed that would guarantee lower electric bills if the referendum passes. Phil, what do you think about this? I believe you're opposed to the Pine Tree Power bill, but is a bill like this even necessary in the middle of a referendum fight?
No, I don't think it is. For some reason, if there was a way to lower the rates, the Public Utilities Commission today, already empowered, could take action if they chose to do that. To have a bill that is not yet passed, run by people we have no idea who it's going to be, to say we're also going to lower the rates, how does that make economic sense? It doesn't.
Well, I think it's a response to the tsunami of ads and money on the other side that is already, has huge ads. Even the guy who no line to touch ever, he's back on the air, right? So, and they don't have that kind of money. The Pine Tree Power does not have that kind of money to counteract that. And they're saying a lot of things that, in my view, probably not in your view, are not actually accurate in terms of what's going to happen to cost. So I think this is their way to say, okay, you don't believe us? You're going to say false things about us? We will show you that this is going to be a law, that we have to do this. And I think it's a way to try and balance out ironically, the power differential in terms of campaigning.
Yeah, it's interesting. So if they do pass that bill, even if the referendum passes, then the legislature doesn't have to do it. So, so you could pass a law requiring them to reduce bills by 10% if another law is passed by the voters, even if the legislature doesn't have to follow it.
Well, and I would love to expand it to everybody. Let's force CMP to pass to reduce prices by 10%. That would be a helpful thing as well.
Another squabble going on in Augusta is got another kind of odd situation. Governor Mills and people in the legislature at odds over whether language related to Maine's native tribes that was made part of the Constitution back in the 1800s, but nowadays is not written in the Constitution if it should be written in it. And this, again, this all comes against the backdrop of the ongoing debates about increasing tribal sovereignty.
Well, it's a historical, terrible example of erasure, right? So the historians, no one can figure out why it was ever taken out. To not print part of our Constitution, so it's in the Constitution. The question is whether it gets printed along with printed copies of the Constitution. And to have the governor's office say, no, it would be confusing. What's confusing is are they taking the stand against something that is pretty much already there? You can just Google it and you can find it. It's not like it's a hidden. It's not like it's a hidden thing. Why it shouldn't be part of the original document it was part of is absolutely mind-boggling to me, and why they want to continue this fight against the tribes is absolutely unheard of for me. And there was a gentleman from Harvard yesterday giving a whole briefing on the impact that's had, not just on the tribes, but on the Maine economy and the health of Maine as well. It was pretty fascinating.
Phil.
Well, I look at it from the perspective is the Constitution is our most sacred document in Maine. If it was amended out.
No, it wasn't.
But if it was, we should have the documentation. If it wasn't, how did that happen? How did that happen? And that really is the question that I think needs to be answered. And it also is more complicated by the fact that the 1980s Indian land claim settlement, the native tribes decided to give up some of their rights. And so it's a very confusing issue, one that I think has a lot of empathy to it, but we need to know the facts. How did this happen and why?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think it's that confusing. I think it's institutional racism. We've
From
seen
a long time ago,
from a long, long time ago. We've seen it. It continues, and it's our time to stop it.
And next week, for the first time in over 20 years, the chiefs of the Maine tribes, the 5 tribal chiefs, are going to address a joint session of the legislature in a State of the Tribes address. As we said, hasn't happened for 2 decades. So, and with all of these other things in the background, so interesting time. Nationally, everything, at least for this weekend news cycle, being dominated by President Biden's proposed budget, which includes large tax increases on the wealthy and many other things. I don't think we've seen all of it yet, but a good part of it. Phil, you deal with people's income for your work. And are a lot of those people worried about what's in this budget?
Not yet. They're more focused on what's going on locally. We're hearing already property taxes may be rising again. That obviously remains to be seen. But as it relates to what the president proposed, I think Americans, not Democrats or Republicans, but Americans are asking their elected officials to do their job. Sit down, hold hearings, take testimony, reach compromise, and pass a budget, which would happen for the first time in, more than a decade. They've done it through continuing resolutions or omnibus budget bills. The legislative process in Washington is broken, and they need to fix it.
And President Biden yesterday in his speech talking about some of these things, basically challenging House Republicans, let's see your budget. Is that the way to do this?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. You know, they talk about saving Medicare and Social Security. Well, those are already additional taxes that we pay on our payroll for those benefits. So to suggest that somehow there's going to be a fight over Medicare and Social Security, that's a red herring. It's about what's going to defense and education and energy and national parks and so on and so forth.
And where's the money come from?
Where's the money come from?
Right.
Let's have a discussion.
Betsy.
Well, I think there's a lot of things about this budget, but the most important thing I think is it is a total pivot from trickle-down economics, let's give lots of breaks to the top and have it, to investment in the American people, middle class, working people. That's what this budget changes completely. And it's not it's taxes on people who make over $400,000, and their taxes have gone so far down, it's unbelievable. Corporate taxes, same thing. So it's a real shift. And I think we agree on this, the fact that the Republicans have for decades said no, 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 and not presented, okay, what would you do? Because the reality is about 65% of the budget is already Social Security, Medicare, and the defense budget. So there's not much left in there to actually cut. So if you're talking about cutting, what is it? Let's see what you're cutting. Let put it forward and let's talk about it, because they have not done that. It's easy to say no from the outside, but to be invited to the table and say, okay, you give me yours, I'll put out mine, and let's negotiate. That hasn't happened, as you said, in years.
And so part of this involves proposed tax increases or eliminating reductions that were done in previous years. As you said, people earning over $400,000, also for corporations. Is that a big bone to throw to the progressives who've been beating the drum for years to tax the rich?
No, I do not think it's political. I think it's the only way we pay for the things that American families need. Schools, education, paid leave, the things that Americans, regular Americans who are just trying to make it, are begging for. We got to pay for it some way. And this idea that the rich it was going to trickle down, we've done that since Reagan and it hasn't worked. So this is a different way of doing it. So I don't think it's a political bone. It's like, okay, we are going to make those investments. We believe in American people. We want to do what you want us to do. We think that we have to grow the middle class again. And the only way we can do it is to pay for it. And the only way to pay for it that makes sense is by taking back some of the money. I mean, the transfer of money from the middle class and lower class to the rich has been unprecedented in the last 20 years.
Okay. Phil.
I'm waiting for the day when we as Americans can agree that it's time to make 1 + 1 = 2. We're celebrating the fact that the president's only going to bounce the checkbook by $1 trillion. We're not talking about the trillions and trillions of dollars of debt that's already piled up behind us. And unless and until our elected officials can agree the growing debt and deficit is a threat to America, we're not going to solve this problem.
Well, and this budget does reduce the deficit by...
The deficit does nothing about the debt.
Yeah.
And which they also need to fix.
Yes.
And increase the debt ceiling in not very long,
Right.
another 6 weeks or whatever, to keep things going. A lot more to come out about this. Meanwhile, earlier this week, China pretty much threatened the U.S. over some of the rhetoric and actions that the U.S. has been taking. How seriously, Phil, should we take what China's been saying this week?
Very seriously. And you combine that with their relationship with Russia and in the Middle East. There's a lot of people out there who are not rooting for us, and you can look at things like their response to the COVID comments about it coming out of the lab, to the balloon that traversed America. They are not our friends, and we need to be on alert.
But I mean, the Chinese clearly believe we're ratcheting up pressure on them, and they clearly want to ratchet up pressure on us. What's going to happen with this? Betsy, you first.
Well, and I agree. We have to pay attention to this. But I would love to get to like 1 + 1 = 2 on the budget. How much of this?
Are you going to dance?
Yeah. How much of this punching back and forth between the international superpowers really is to serve the military-industrial complex that wants to keep building up? If China's going to go after us, it's not going to be with military weapons. It's going to be through technology, through cyberspace, through other ways that they control or contribute or influence our economy. I think that we are so dependent as the top structure of our economy is so dependent on there being conflict, because otherwise how do you possibly defend the kind of money that goes onto our military industrial complex? And I think we have to start looking at that too.
Well, that's going to take a while, I think, right?
Oh yeah. But I'm never stopping fighting for it.
There you go. Okay, winners and losers this week. Betsy, you first.
Well, it was International Women's Day this past week, and it's National Women's History Month. The winners in my book are all the women in this state who have personally sacrificed, given up a lot of things to be in positions of power. If you look at it, we have the governor, we have the Speaker of the House, we have 5 of the 6 Democratic leaders, we have 21 committee chairs, we have, these women have done it. They are in power, and I'm really excited to say, okay, let's go. let's do those things that we work so hard to get the table to do. So they're my winners. Losers to me this week is Casella, the sludge company that is basically bullying and holding us hostage, holding municipalities hostage over what I believe is a manufactured crisis.
All right, Phil.
My loser is more of a sad story. We're saying goodbye to a mill in Jay, Maine that's been there since the late 1800s. That's a sad day. And on a positive note, the memory of Carmen Footer, who was one of the women who stood outside on a Tuesday waving American flags in response
to Freeport Flag Ladies.
Freeport Flag Ladies in response to 9/11. She sadly passed away.
Yeah, after doing the service that they have provided for a lot of years.
Yes.
A lot of mornings. Good. Thank you both very much. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week with more Political Brew. News Center Maine continues right after this.